So the ATF has now arbitrarily decided to redefine AR-15 pistols, AK pistols, and other types of pistols as any other weapons under the NFA and subject them to tax and potentially even put people in risk of felonies. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that the ATF cannot arbitrarily decide what falls under the Second Amendment and what does not, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to give a big shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, and that is Got Your Six. For just $2.99 a month, you get access to a lot of amazing things on their app. This includes up-to-date local, state, and national legislative information, and you have the ability to create small and large groups. And one of the neat features is that they have this button called Initiate Freedom. So if your Second Amendment rights are ever violated through something like a red flag law, you click this button and what is essentially an Amber Alert for firearms owners goes out to those individuals in your group. So if you're interested in this app, I'll go ahead and put links down in the details section to Got Your Six. So yesterday we got a really significant, post that went out, and it primarily came from the Military Arms channel. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Military Arms channel. If you're not, I highly recommend you go and subscribe to his channel because it's amazing. But on Instagram, he put out a notice, and it was essentially an alert, and it was some information based on a very prominent law firm that deals a lot with firearms manufacturers, sellers of firearms, and they deal heavily with these companies. So I'll just read to you real quick the Instagram post that went out through the Military Arms channel, and also put links down below if you want to look at these for yourself. But the main picture just says, alert, the BATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, is in the process of redefining AR-15 pistols, AK pistols, etc. as AOWs or any other weapons. This means they can charge any owner of such a firearm under the NFA with a federal crime. And since essentially this went out and the link to the letter went out, there has been a storm that has opened up on social media from firearms owners, because once again, like we saw recently with the Q honey badger, and with like a lot of other things like with bump stocks, where we saw the ATF arbitrarily redefining what they classify bump stocks to be, once again the ATF is arbitrarily redefining things to suit their agenda. And so I'll just read to you real quick some of the stuff that was attached to the Military Arms channel Instagram post. It says, urgent, please share this important message. I was sent this message to share, see link. The law firm of Wiley Rain, which is one of the largest law firms in the firearms industry and represents a number of major manufacturers in their dealings with the BATF and regulations. This is not a joke, nor is it speculation. This is a stark warning of things to come, and I hope it prompts you to take political action. This letter is about several things, but primarily it is something you should take very seriously because of recent actions by the BATF that will affect any owner of AR-15 pistols, AK pistols, HK pistols, etc. Yes, this means your Saint AR pistol or your Draco. That's exactly what the ATF is targeting. There are several things of importance in this email. First, it goes against the Trump administration executive order mandating such regulatory practices cease. The BATF has led the charge, is thumbing their nose at the president and the DOJ under the leadership of Attorney General Barr. Second, any firearm that has a barrel length that is too long or firearm that is too heavy will be considered not importable by the BATF. No more pistol versions of rifles will be importable. Third, the most important, through unwritten interpretation of regulations and through private correspondences with unspecified companies, the ATF has capriciously and arbitrarily decided that any, and caps, any AR-15 pistol, AK pistol, HK pistol, etc. is an any other weapon, and thus is subject to the NFA and taxation. Any company who produces such firearms for sale in the United States and any consumer/owner of such firearms are either manufacturing or in possession of illegal AOWs. This is being retroactively enforced. It does not matter if you brought a previously approved firearm. The only way you can be certain that you are not in possession of an illegal NFA item is to personally submit your AR-15 pistol, AK pistol, etc. to the ATF for determination. And so this is the post that initially went out from the Military Arms channel. It was picked up by a lot of social media accounts, and now we're just trying to get the word out that the ATF is arbitrarily redefining AR-15 pistols or any type of pistol as AOWs or any other weapons under the NFA. So important for this, when you look at what an AOW is, they've kind of been these weird in-between type of weapons. And as you can see by the end of that definition, it explicitly says that they do not include things like pistols or revolvers. So currently we've been operating under federal regulation and under the ATF's definition, people with AR-15 pistols or AK-style pistols had those because they were considered pistols. They were considered handguns. and did not fall under the AOW language and were not subject to the NFA or taxation. But now what the ATF is saying is that they are going to redefine these items as actually being AOWs and no longer being classified as pistols or handguns, and therefore being subject to the NFA and taxation. So that's really what this is all about. The ATF is going back, redefining these types of firearms and putting them under the NFA's AOW and subjecting them to taxation. Very similar to something we saw happen in the state of California, where all of a sudden, retroactively, we had a redefinition of specific firearms, making them assault weapons in the state of California, retroactively enforcing that against firearms people already owned, and subjecting them to, I guess, classification with the state of California, where we had to register them with the state if you wanted to be in lawful possession of those assault weapons. It's very similar to what the ATF and the federal government is doing here at large. They're redefining something and applying it retroactively, regardless of whether someone had lawfully purchased those and possessed those prior to the redefinition of the language. Now, when you look at the letter that went out from the law firm, and I'll put a link to that as well in the description section, there's multiple parts to it. The first part is talking about importation, and it is the ATF modifying their definitions of any other weapons and reclassifying AR-15 pistols, AK pistols, in a way so that they are no longer importable. And in the letter, the law firm identifies some features that the ATF has essentially targeted to determining whether something is actually a handgun or pistol or whether it is in any other weapon. Some of these objective design features, which some of them don't actually seem that objective, they actually seem more subjective, include things like incorporation of rifle sights, utilization of rifle caliber ammunition, both 5.56 and 7.62, incorporation of rifle length barrels, the weapon's heavy weight. So heavy weight kind of also doesn't seem very objective. That seems more subjective, unless the ATF is going to put a specific weight limit, which we haven't seen anything like that yet. The ability to accept magazines that range in capacity from 20 rounds to 100 rounds, which will contribute to the overall weight of the firearm, and overall length of the weapon, which creates a front heavy imbalance when held in one hand. Again, kind of a subjective, not necessarily an objective standard, but these are some features that the ATF is now signaling that they're going to look at in determining whether something is a pistol or handgun, or whether something actually falls under any other weapon classification now. And the reason why everybody's very upset about this is the next section that you can see in the letter, where it talks about the ATF has identified these standards for importation bases. So they're saying, we're going to look at these features and we're going to determine whether these types of AR pistols, AK pistols can be imported into the US. But that redefinition of pistols, which we traditionally consider pistols and handguns, into any other weapons based on those features can be applied to those individuals who are already in possession of these items and manufacturers within the US who are manufacturing and selling these items. And so when you look at this section, it says consideration of certain handguns as any other weapons. The new interpretation of the handgun definition could have additional significant effects on manufacturers and gun owners. Under the National Firearms Act, a firearm that has an overall length of less than 26 inches and is neither a pistol, rifle, nor shotgun is classified as any other weapon, an AOW like we discussed previously. This means that if a firearm under 26 inches in overall length is determined to not be a pistol, rifle, or shotgun, it would necessarily be classified as an AOW. AOWs require the payment of a tax and registration with the federal government. Under ATF's new reading of the definition, firearms previously classified as large-sized handguns by the ATF may now require registration under the National Firearms Act as an AOW. Possession of such firearm without registration is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Since the ATF has not articulated a standard, it is difficult to definitively know whether a large handgun is now an AOW because it may be deemed by the agency to be too large or too heavy to fit within the statutory definition of handgun. The only definitive way to know is to submit the firearm to the ATF for evaluation, a process that can take over a year. So that's what this is really all about. The ATF is changing their definition, redefining arbitrarily what they consider to be a handgun / pistol / revolver and what they determine to be an AOW. They are going back on what they previously were saying, where AR pistols, AK pistols are simply just large, oversized handguns, and now they're saying, no, we are going to consider those as AOWs. And because we consider them AOWs, you, citizens of the US who've already lawfully purchased these, already are in possession of these, manufacturers, if you are selling these, You have to make sure that they are registered as AOWs and you have to pay a tax stamp. If you don't and you get caught in possession of one of these that wasn't registered, you didn't pay the tax, then you are subject to a federal crime and potentially up to 10 years in prison. And like what was mentioned in the military arms channel notice that went out, Trump has already indicated that the ATF and all other federal agencies are not supposed to be doing any sort of action like this. But the ATF has decided to do it anyways. Now, is this going to happen prior to the election? Are they actually going to try to enforce this? Are we going to get any further guidance from the ATF about what exactly they're trying to do here? Very unlikely. We're not going to hear anything. Really what's happening is the ATF as a regulatory agency just is waiting for Biden to get elected, and then we'll probably see a lot of these things from the ATF ramp up even more. And it just probably is them setting the stage for a large-scale attack on Second Amendment rights. One thing I want to mention to you guys, the ATF is a regulatory agency. They have an interest in making sure there are gun laws, because if there are no gun laws that they can regulate and enforce, a lot of people in the ATF are out of a job. So their interest is gun control. Their interest is violations of the Second Amendment. Their interest is to make sure that we can't have these things, that there are penalties attached to specific firearms, because it gives them jobs. And so doing things like this benefits the ATF in the long run because it gives them job security. And since I know a lot of my viewers are based in California, what impact does this have? What impact does the AOW classification of AR pistols, AK pistols have on the state of California? One thing I want you to keep in mind, the state of California already has the Assault Weapons Control Act, legislative standards that say that you cannot have specific firearms here in the state because they're classified as assault weapons. And one of those things is classifications of AR pistols. So in the state of California, you can have pistols, but they have to be fixed mag, and then there are other restrictions that are applied to those types of firearms. What this would do is add an additional layer to that, and you would have to have an FFL that you can go to, register it as an AOW with the ATF, pay your tax stamp. So it just adds in a whole nother additional layer here in the state of California to an already very messy scheme that we have. So this is definitely not ideal, and like I mentioned, it harkens back to something we already saw happen in the state of California with the redefinition of specific firearms as assault weapons and the ex post facto application of that law to lawfully acquired and possessed firearms. Now we're just seeing this happening at a large scale nationally by a redefinition of the ATF. Also, I'll ask you guys, please make sure you're sharing this video, share other videos that you guys see pop up about this topic, share posts that you see pop up about this topic, because we really need to make this go widespread, bring everybody's attention to this, because like I mentioned, we've seen a lot of this stuff play out in the state of California. And one of the unfortunate things is in the state of California, California residents are kind of left by themselves to try to fight these things. And one of the things that we've learned in the state of California as gun owners is that we don't want this type of stuff to spread nationwide. So we need to make sure we're supporting the nation as a whole, gun owners within the nation as a whole, to fight against these types of things that are moving towards removing our Second Amendment rights in the US. So if you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, I want to thank one of the main supporters of the channel, and that is USCCA. USCCA provides legal protection for patriots like me and you. So if you have a CCW and you ever find yourself in a defensive situation, I highly recommend you have some sort of legal protection like what USCCA offers. And if you'd be interested in that, I'll go ahead and put a link down to them in the detail section. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.